The day Duke Raymond stepped through the golden doors of his mansion with his pregnant mistress on his arm, he expected his wife to cry, beg, collapse, or fight for him. But Duchess Amara did something far more terrifying. She smiled. Not loudly, not weakly, just a calm, royal smile that made every servant in the hall stop breathing. Raymond proudly introduced the young woman beside him as the future mother of my child, then turned to his wife and ordered her to prepare the east wing for them. Amara looked at the mistress, then at her husband, and quietly removed her wedding ring. By sunrise, she was gone. Raymond laughed at first. He thought she had left with a broken heart. He thought the mansion, the cars, the accounts, and the luxury life was still his. He had no idea that every wall around him was already closing in. Because Duchess Amara was not just his wife. She was the secret owner of the billion-dollar company where his mistress worked. And the moment Raymond humiliated her, Amara signed one file that changed everything. His accounts froze, his private loans surfaced, his hidden debts became public, his luxury cars were seized, his mansion received a foreclosure notice. Then his mistress got an email that made her scream. Her employment, benefits, apartment allowance, and secret executive privileges had all been terminated. By evening, Raymond was standing outside the same mansion he once ruled, holding a suitcase, begging security to let him back in. But Amara arrived in a black Rolls-Royce, dressed like royalty, surrounded by lawyers and board members. Raymond fell silent, because the woman he thought he had destroyed had just taken everything, and she had one final document in her hand that would finish him completely. The mansion gates had never looked so tall to Raymond. For years he had passed through them as if the iron bows and golden crests were bending to greet him. He had returned from banquets, business dinners, charity galas, and late-night meetings with the easy arrogance of a man who believed the world had been built for his comfort. He had never noticed how the guards watched him. He had never noticed how the servants became quiet when he entered a room. He had never noticed the way his wife's eyes often studied him like a person studying a crack in a wall, wondering how long before the whole building collapsed. Now he noticed everything. The guards stood on the other side of the gate, expressionless. They no longer called him Your Grace. They no longer stepped aside when he lifted his chin. One of them, a tall man named Marcus, who had served the house for 9 years, held a small tablet in his hand and checked the updated access list as if Raymond was a stranger asking for entry. Marcus, Raymond said, forcing a laugh that cracked in his throat, open the gate. Marcus looked at him calmly. I cannot do that, sir. Sir. The word hit harder than an insult. Beside Raymond, Celeste gripped the handle of her designer suitcase. Her face was pale with disbelief, her carefully styled hair slightly loosened from the chaos of the day. One hand rested on her rounded belly, the other clutched her phone, where the termination email still glowed like a curse. This is your house, she whispered sharply. Tell them this is your house. Raymond swallowed. His mouth was dry. The mansion behind the gate seemed farther away than it had ever been, glowing beneath the evening lights like a kingdom he had lost while laughing at the Queen. Then the black Rolls-Royce turned into the long drive. The car did not rush. It moved with smooth, silent authority, headlights washing over the polished stone pillars and the frozen faces at the gate. Raymond turned toward it, and for one desperate second, his pride tried to rise again. He wanted to believe Amara had returned to argue, to bargain, to prove she still cared enough to hurt. But when the driver opened the door and Duchess Amara stepped out, Raymond understood that love had not returned. Judgment had. She wore a deep ivory suit with a high collar and gold buttons, elegant but severe, the kind of outfit that did not ask for respect because it already owned it. Her hair was pulled back neatly, and the diamonds at her ears were smaller than the ones she wore at public events, but somehow they looked more powerful. She held a leather folder in one hand. Behind her came 3 lawyers, 2 board members Raymond recognized from Meridian Crown Holdings, and an older woman named Madame Elise, who had once been Amara's private secretary before becoming the most feared corporate strategist in the country. Raymond stared at the board members. A cold thought moved through him. Why were they standing behind his wife? Celeste noticed them too. Her breathing changed. "Raymond," she whispered, "why is Mr. Han here?" Mr. Han had been the chairman of the company where Celeste worked. At least that was what she believed. He had approved her fast promotions, her apartment allowance, her private travel privileges, her sudden access to executive events. He had smiled at her in boardrooms and called her promising. She had never wondered why her rise happened so quickly, because she had accepted praise as naturally as Raymond accepted power. But Mr. Han did not even look at her now. He stood behind Amara. Raymond's eyes dropped to the leather folder. "What is this performance?" he demanded. "You cannot lock me out of my own home." Amara looked at him as if he had spoken a language she had once known, but no longer used. "Your own home," she repeated softly. Raymond stepped closer to the gate. "Do not embarrass yourself, Amara. Whatever little revenge you think you are having, this has gone far enough." The wind moved through the hedges. Somewhere behind the mansion, a fountain whispered into the dusk. Amara opened the folder. Raymond hated the silence more than shouting. Shouting gave him something to fight. Silence made him hear his own heartbeat. "This property," Amara said, "belongs to the House of Vale Trust. The House of Vale Trust is controlled by me." Raymond's nostrils flared. "That is impossible." "It was impossible when you never read what you signed." The words slipped into him like a key entering a lock. For a moment, the night around him disappeared, and he was back 12 years earlier, standing in a smaller room, wearing a cheaper suit, staring at a young woman whose quiet confidence annoyed him because it made him feel exposed. Amara Vale had not been a duchess then. She had been the daughter of a dead industrialist and a mother who taught her that kindness without boundaries was just an invitation for predators. At 24, Amara had inherited a collapsing network of factories, shipping licenses, and forgotten patents. Everyone said she would sell it within a year. Everyone said she was too reserved, too young, too soft-spoken. Men in grey suits smiled at her across tables and offered to help by taking everything from her at half value. Raymond had met her at one of those meetings. He had been handsome in a way that made rooms forgive him before he spoke. He had an old title, a famous name, and almost no money. The world called him noble, creditors called him overdue. He knew how to wear cufflinks he could not afford, how to shake hands as if he had already won, how to make ambitious people feel chosen. Amara had watched him enter that room and noticed what no one else did. The shine on his shoes was new, but the soles were thin. His watch was expensive, but 2 seasons old. His smile was charming, but his eyes kept measuring the exits. Later, he told her that he had loved her from the moment he saw her. The truth was colder. He had recognized opportunity. And Amara, though brilliant in business, had still been young enough to mistake being needed for being loved. "You are lonely at the top," Raymond had told her one rainy evening, standing beside her after a charity auction. "People don't understand women like you. They fear you. I don't." At the time, those words had warmed something in her. Years later, she would remember them differently. He had not said he admired her. He had said he did not fear her. The warning had been there from the beginning. Back at the gate, Raymond's hands curled around the iron bars. "I did not sign away this house," he said. Amara tilted her head slightly. "You signed restructuring documents 3 years ago after your investment fund collapsed. You told me it was temporary. You told me you needed liquidity to protect the family name." Raymond felt heat crawl up his neck. Celeste looked at him. "Investment fund." He ignored her. Amara continued, each word precise. "I covered the debts. I moved the property into a protected trust. You were grateful for 2 weeks, then you returned to your old habits." Madame Elise stepped forward and handed a copy of the document to Marcus, who passed it through the gate. Raymond snatched it, scanning pages full of clauses he had once dismissed as boring. His signature sat at the bottom, bold and careless. He remembered that day. He had been irritated because Amara had asked him to sit with her lawyers. He had waved his hand, signed page after page, and said, "You worry too much, darling. That is why I married you. You handle the paper, I handle the people." She had looked at him, then, with an expression he had failed to read. Not hurt, not admiration. A quiet knotting of evidence. The paper shook in his hand. "This is manipulation," he said. "No," Amara replied, "it is documentation." Celeste's voice rose. "What about me? You cannot fire me like that. I have a contract." Mr. Han finally looked at her. "You had a contract based on false disclosures, conflicts of interest, and unauthorized benefits." Celeste's lips parted. "False disclosures." Madame Elise removed a second paper from her folder. "You failed to disclose a personal relationship with Duke Raymond while participating in projects connected to his shell companies. You also accepted housing privileges and travel expenses approved through a channel now under investigation." Raymond turned sharply. "Investigation?" Amara looked at him. And that was when fear finally became visible on his face. Not because he had lost the house, not because his cars were gone, not because his accounts were frozen. Those things wounded his pride, but men like Raymond always believed money could be found again. What terrified him was the word investigation. It meant records. It meant witnesses. It meant the past had learned to speak. For years, Raymond had trusted in confusion. He moved money through friendly names, borrowed against assets he did not fully own, promised investors access to Amara's networks, hinted that he controlled companies he only visited as her husband. He built his illusion like a palace of mirrors. Everywhere he turned, he saw himself larger. He had never imagined Amara had been standing behind the glass the entire time. The first time she discovered one of his lies, she had been 6 months into the marriage. It was a receipt. Nothing dramatic, not a lipstick stain, not a secret hotel room, not a whispered confession. A receipt from a private club for a dinner he claimed was with diplomats. The names on the guest list were not diplomats, they were lenders. Amara had stared at the receipt in her study while rain scratched the windows. She remembered the smell of paper, the weight of her wedding ring, the absurd little pain of realizing that betrayal often entered quietly, not with thunder, but with stationery. When she confronted him, Raymond laughed and kissed her forehead. "My love, rich people move money differently. You are brilliant with factories and contracts, but social finance is not your world." Social finance. For years afterward, whenever she heard that phrase, she felt the old version of herself standing in that room, trying to decide whether to trust her husband or her instinct. She chose her husband that night. It was the last time she chose him without proof. At the gate, Raymond's voice dropped. "Amara, we can discuss this privately." The shift was immediate. Gone was the command. Gone was the public arrogance. Now came the tone he used when he wanted to charm a room into forgetting what it had seen. Amara's expression did not change. "Privately," she asked, "like when you brought her into my home." Celeste flinched. Raymond glanced at the board members, the lawyers, the guards. "You are angry. I understand. I made mistakes." "Mistakes," Amara repeated. He stepped closer. "I was wrong, but you do not want scandal. Think carefully. Think of the family name." Something passed through Amara's eyes then, not sadness exactly, more like a door opening to a room she had sealed long ago. The family name. Raymond had used those words like a weapon for years. When he needed money, it was for the family name. When he missed dinners, it was for the family name. When he asked her to smile beside him at public events after humiliating her in private, it was for the family name. The name was always hungry, always sacred, always more important than her dignity. But the family name had not stayed awake with her mother during the final months of illness. The family name had not rebuilt factories after her father's partners abandoned them. The family name had not learned every clause, every debt structure, every boardroom trick from midnight until dawn. Amara had. She remembered being 16, sitting outside her father's office, listening to men discuss her future as if she were furniture. She will marry well, one had said. That is the cleanest solution. Her father, weakened by sickness but still sharp, had replied, "My daughter is not a solution, she is the heir." After his death, they came for her anyway. A banker once placed a hand over hers during a negotiation and said, "You don't need to understand all these numbers, Lady Amara." She had smiled, removed his hand, and recited the loan structure from memory until his face turned grey. That same banker later became one of her smallest creditors. Raymond had known pieces of that story. He admired it publicly, resented it privately, and underestimated it fatally. "Think of the family name," he repeated. Amara closed the folder. "I did." She handed the final document to her lead attorney, Mr. Dacosta, who stepped forward. "Duke Raymond," the attorney said, "you are being served notice of civil action regarding fraudulent misrepresentation, unauthorized leveraging of marital assets, and breach of multiple financial agreements. Additionally, the court has granted temporary restrictions preventing you from accessing properties held under the House of Vale Trust pending review." Raymond stared at him. The world seemed to tilt. Celeste's voice became thin. "What does that mean?" Amara answered without looking at her. "It means he cannot come inside." Raymond gripped the bars harder. "You would do this to me." For the first time that evening, Amara's smile disappeared. "No, Raymond," she said, "you did this. I simply stopped paying for it." The words struck the air with such finality that even Celeste went silent. A memory crawled through Raymond's mind, one he had buried under years of noise. It was the night before their wedding. Amara had stood on a balcony overlooking the old garden, her veil still pinned loosely in her hair from the rehearsal. She had looked younger then, softer, lit by lanterns and hope. Raymond had joined her, and she had asked him a question that annoyed him because it sounded too serious for such a beautiful night. "If one day you stop loving me," she had said, "will you at least be honest?" He had laughed, wrapping his arms around her. "I will never stop loving you." She had turned slightly. "That is not what I asked." He remembered now that he had not answered. At the time, silence had saved him. Now it condemned him. Celeste began to cry, but her tears carried more fury than sorrow. "Raymond, you told me she was powerless. You said the company board hated her. You said after the baby came, she would accept everything because she had no choice." Amara's eyes moved to Celeste. The younger woman froze. There had been a time Amara might have hated her. In the early months when whispers first reached her, she had imagined Celeste as a thief standing at the edge of her marriage. But then Amara had studied the records. She saw the gifts, the promotions, the allowances, the careful grooming of ambition. Celeste was not innocent, but she was not the architect. She was a participant who thought she had found a ladder, unaware that Raymond had built it over a pit. Still, choices had consequences. "You had a choice too," Amara said quietly. Celeste's face hardened. "You think you are better than me." "No," Amara said. "I think I know the cost of pretending not to see the truth." For a moment, Celeste looked as if she might shout. Then her phone buzzed again. She looked down. Her bank card had been declined on an automatic payment. Then another message. Her company apartment access would expire at midnight. Then another. Legal requested her presence for a compliance interview. Her hand trembled so violently that the phone almost fell. Raymond saw it and felt something ugly rise in him, not concern, blame. "You stupid girl," he snapped. "You used your company email for everything." Celeste turned on him. "You told me it was safe." "I told you not to be careless." Amara watched them unravel, and the sight did not satisfy her as much as she had once imagined it might. Revenge looked glamorous from a distance. Up close, it looked like two frightened people discovering the floor beneath them had been paper all along. But justice was not always sweet. Sometimes it was simply necessary. Mr. Dacosta passed the documents through the gate. You have been formally served. Raymond did not take them. The papers fell at his feet. For a second, no one moved. Then Marcus unlocked the small pedestrian gate, stepped out, picked up the documents, and placed them against Raymond's suitcase. "Sir," Marcus said, "you should take them." Raymond looked at him with open hatred. "After everything I have done for you." Marcus's jaw tightened. Amara knew that look. She had seen Marcus's wife in the hospital 3 years earlier when Raymond delayed staff insurance reimbursements to cover a gambling debt. Amara had paid the bills quietly. Marcus had never mentioned it, but he knew, most of the staff knew. Raymond had always mistaken silence for loyalty. Marcus stepped back. "Good evening, sir." The small gate shut. The lock clicked. Celeste made a broken sound. "Where are we supposed to go?" Raymond turned toward Amara. "You cannot leave a pregnant woman outside." There it was. The final shield. Amara's eyes lowered briefly to Celeste's belly. Whatever Celeste had done, the child had done nothing. Amara had already thought of that. She had thought of it long before Raymond brought her home as a weapon. That was the difference between them. Raymond used people first and considered consequences later. Amara considered consequences even for people who had hurt her. "A medical residence has been arranged for Ms. Celeste for 72 hours, Amara said. "After that, she may cooperate with the investigation and request assistance through legal channels." Celeste blinked, shocked by the mercy she had not expected. Raymond heard only what threatened him, and me. Amara met his eyes. "You have friends, do you not?" It was a cruel question, because they both knew the answer. Raymond had companions, flatterers, borrowers, opportunists, people who drank his champagne and repeated his jokes. But friends required truth, and Raymond had avoided truth like poverty. He pulled out his phone and began calling anyway. The first man did not answer. The second sent him to voicemail. The third answered, listened for 12 seconds, and claimed to be boarding a flight. A cousin promised to call back. A banker said all communication should go through legal counsel. With each call, Raymond's face changed. Celeste watched him, and the fantasy she had carried for months began collapsing. She had imagined him powerful, trapped in a loveless marriage, waiting for her to give him the courage to choose happiness. She had believed the mansion would become hers, that servants would learn her preferences, that society would swallow the scandal once the baby arrived. But power that disappears when paperwork appears is not power. It is costume. Amara turned to leave. Raymond saw the movement and panicked. "Amara," he said. She paused. His voice softened again. "Please." That word had once been rare from him. Now it crawled out stripped of dignity. She looked over her shoulder. He stepped closer to the bars. "We built a life together." "No," she said, "I built it. You decorated it with lies." His face twisted. "You loved me." "I did." The simplicity of the answer silenced him more than denial would have. Amara remembered loving him. She would not rewrite that part to make herself feel wiser. She had loved the way he could make a dull room sparkle, the way he remembered people's names when it benefited him, the way he once danced with her barefoot in the kitchen during a storm because the power went out and the staff had gone home. For years, she kept returning to those moments like a poor woman counting coins, hoping they might still add up to a marriage. But love was not evidence that someone deserved more chances. Sometimes love was only proof of how long you had tried. She entered the Rolls-Royce. The driver closed the door. As the car passed through the gate, Raymond saw her profile through the tinted window. She did not look back. That was when he understood the worst part. She was not acting strong. She was free. The next morning, the city woke to whispers. No official statement had been released, but wealth had its own weather system. Rumors moved faster than news. By breakfast, private clubs were murmuring about frozen accounts. By noon, bankers were distancing themselves. By evening, social pages were careful not to mention Raymond's title at all, which was the loudest insult they could offer. In a hotel lobby across town, Raymond sat with sunglasses on though he was indoors, trying to look unbothered while his card was declined for the second time. Celeste stood beside him, wearing the same outfit from the previous day, her expression tight with humiliation. The medical residence Amara arranged had offered her a quiet suite, but Raymond had refused to let her go without him. "She is trying to separate us," he said. Celeste had believed him for 3 hours. Now, watching the receptionist politely ask for another payment method, she began to wonder if Amara had been trying to save her from him. Raymond leaned across the desk. "Do you know who I am?" The receptionist smiled with the practiced sorrow of someone who absolutely knew and had been instructed not to care. "I'm sorry, sir. Without valid payment or authorization, we cannot complete the booking." Raymond turned away, cursing under his breath. Celeste followed him outside into the heat. The city felt too bright, too loud. People moved around them with ordinary purpose, buying coffee, answering calls, hailing cars. It offended Raymond that the world had not paused for his downfall. "This is temporary," he said. Celeste did not answer. "I have assets abroad." She looked at him. "Do you?" He glared. "Do not start." Something inside her shifted. Not courage yet, but the first bitter taste of clarity. "You told me she depended on you." "She did." "No," Celeste said, voice shaking. "You depended on her." Raymond slapped the air between them with words. "You were nobody before me." Celeste recoiled, as if he had touched her. The sentence revealed too much. It was not anger speaking. It was the philosophy beneath every gift he had given her. "You were nobody before me," which meant, anything you have, I own. Anything you become, I created. Any pain you suffer is your fault for forgetting who lifted you. Celeste's eyes filled, but this time she did not cry. "You told me you loved me," she whispered. Raymond looked around to see if anyone was watching. "Not here." She laughed once, a small humorless sound. "Not here, not at the mansion, not at the office, not anywhere it costs you something." For a moment, Raymond seemed ready to explode. Then his phone rang. He checked the screen. His face changed. It was Lord Adrian Vale, Amara's uncle. Raymond stepped away before answering. "Adrian," he said quickly, "thank God. This has become a misunderstanding. Amara is emotional. You know how she can be." Celeste watched from a few feet away. She could not hear Adrian's words, but she saw Raymond's confidence return in pieces. His shoulders straightened, his chin lifted. Hope made him ugly again. "Yes," Raymond said, "exactly. She is damaging the Vale reputation. Someone must bring her to reason." There was a pause. Then Raymond's smile faded. "What do you mean? You warned me." Another pause. His grip tightened around the phone. "Adrian, listen to me." The call ended. Raymond stared at the screen. Years earlier, Lord Adrian had pulled him aside at a winter gala. The old man smelled of tobacco and expensive soap. He had watched Raymond laugh too loudly with investors and said, "A woman like Amara does not strike the first time you insult her. That is why fools think she cannot strike." Raymond had raised his glass. "Are you calling me a fool?" Adrian had smiled. "Not yet." Raymond had forgotten the conversation. Adrian had not. Across the city, Amara sat in the top-floor boardroom of Meridian Crown Holdings, watching the skyline sharpen under the afternoon sun. The boardroom table was black marble, long enough to make powerful people feel small. At the far end, a wall displayed live updates from the company's legal, finance, and compliance divisions. Lines of red-flagged accounts, shell entities, transfers, approvals, names. Raymond's name appeared again and again. Celeste's appeared less often, but enough. Madame Elise stood beside the screen. The investigators believe he used at least 5 social investment dinners to solicit funds using implied access to Meridian contracts. Amara nodded. How many victims? Confirmed, 12, potentially 31. Amara's fingers rested on the table. 12 confirmed. 31 possible. Behind every number was someone who had trusted a title, a smile, a promise. Raymond had not only betrayed her, he had turned her name into bait. Mr. Han cleared his throat. We must decide how aggressive the public statement should be. Amara looked at the flagged transactions, truthful. That may be aggressive by itself, Madame Elise said. A faint smile touched Amara's mouth. Then let truth be aggressive. The board members exchanged glances. Some had feared this day, not because they doubted her, but because they had seen what happened when private pain entered public power. Many leaders became reckless when wounded. They confused revenge with strategy. They burned everything to feel warm. But Amara was not burning. She was excavating. Carefully, methodically, layer by layer. That frightened them more. Mr. Han said, there is one sensitive matter. Celeste is pregnant. Public sympathy may tilt if this appears punitive. I know, Amara said. Then we should prepare for that narrative. We will not attack her pregnancy, Amara replied. We will address her conduct, nothing more. Madame Elise's expression softened for half a second. She had known Amara since she was 25 and pretending not to be afraid. She had watched her grow into someone who could sign billion-dollar decisions without blinking, but still remembered the names of injured factory workers. That was why people underestimated her. They thought mercy meant weakness. They did not understand that Amara's mercy had rules. And once those rules were broken, it did not vanish. It became discipline. That evening, Amara returned not to the mansion, but to a smaller house by the old river, a place she had bought before marriage and kept in her mother's name. Raymond had hated it because it was not impressive. He called it sentimental. Amara called it quiet. Inside, the rooms smelled faintly of cedar and lemon polish. No servants rushed to greet her. No chandeliers tried to prove anything. She removed her shoes at the door and stood in the silence. For the first time in years, the silence did not feel lonely. She walked to the study, where her mother's portrait hung above the fireplace. Lady Seraphine Vale had been beautiful in a severe way, with eyes that seemed to forgive nothing but understand everything. Amara poured tea. She did not drink and sat beneath the portrait. Her hand moved unconsciously to the place where her wedding ring used to be. There was a pale circle on her finger. A ghost of devotion. She remembered her mother's last warning before the wedding. They had sat in this same house, rain pressing against the windows. Her mother was already thin from illness, but her voice still carried iron. Raymond enjoys being admired, Seraphine said. Amara had laughed softly. Most people do. No, most people enjoy affection. He enjoys mirrors. Amara had frowned. You do not trust him. I trust what he wants. That is different. At 26, Amara had been tired of suspicion. She had survived boardrooms full of men who saw her as prey. Raymond made her laugh. Raymond made her feel like a woman instead of an institution. Raymond said he wanted her, not her company. So she defended him. He loves me, she said. Her mother looked at her with such tenderness that Amara remembered it years later as the first heartbreak. Then make sure he loves you when you say no. Amara had not understood then. She understood now. Raymond loved yes. Yes to money, yes to forgiveness, yes to status, yes to silence. He loved any version of Amara that made him larger. The first time she truly said no, he brought Celeste home. Amara closed her eyes. For a moment, she was back in the mansion hall. Raymond's voice echoed, "The future mother of my child." He had said it as if the child were a crown and Celeste the new queen. He had expected Amara to shatter publicly so he could call her unstable. He had arranged the scene with theatrical cruelty. The staff present, the golden doors open, Celeste dressed in soft blue, one hand on her belly like a portrait of victory. But he missed one detail. The night before, Amara already knew. Not suspected. Knew. Madame Elise had sent the final report at 2:13. Amara had sat alone in the East Library, reading every page: hotel records, apartment leases, company approvals, shell accounts, medical appointment payments, messages between Raymond and associates discussing the transition. One phrase had appeared twice. "Once the child arrives, Amara will fold." Amara remembered staring at that sentence until it stopped hurting and started teaching. So when Raymond entered the next day with Celeste, he thought he was beginning the war. Amara had already ended it. At the medical residence, Celeste sat on the edge of a bed with white sheets and stared at a tray of untouched soup. Raymond was not with her. After their argument outside the hotel, he had left to fix things. He had taken her last working credit card with him, promising to return in an hour. 4 hours passed. A nurse knocked gently and entered. "You should eat something," the woman said. Celeste nodded but did not move. Her phone sat beside her. No messages from Raymond, 3 from compliance, 1 from her younger sister asking if the rumors were true, 1 from her mother, "Baby, call me." Celeste did not call. She was not ready to hear love without luxury attached. It would break her faster than cruelty. She looked around the room Amara had arranged. It was comfortable, private, secure, not lavish but safe. There was bottled water, prenatal vitamins, a doctor on call. Celeste hated Amara for providing it. Hatred was easier than gratitude because gratitude would require admitting who had abandoned her. Her mind drifted back to the first time she met Raymond. It had been at a Meridian charity reception. Celeste was a junior project coordinator then, ambitious and exhausted, wearing a borrowed dress and shoes that hurt. She had been standing near a display of company expansion plans when Raymond approached with 2 glasses of champagne. "You look like the only person here who understands the room," he said. She laughed because she wanted it to be true. He asked about her work. He listened with focus so intense it felt like sunlight. When she mentioned a problem in her department, he knew the name of the director. When she said she wanted to move into executive strategy, he said, "People like you should not wait for permission." A week later, her manager praised her unexpectedly. A month later, she was invited to meetings above her rank. 3 months later, Raymond kissed her in the private elevator of a hotel and said his marriage had been dead for years. Celeste believed him because believing him made her special. She never asked why a dead marriage still funded his life. Now, sitting alone, she replayed every compliment and heard the hook beneath it. "People like you. Not you. People like you. Replaceable, useful, hungry." Her stomach tightened, and she placed a hand over her belly. "I'm sorry," she whispered. She did not know who she was apologizing to, the child, herself, maybe even Amara. Across town, Raymond visited a man named Victor Sloan. Victor lived in a penthouse full of glass sculptures and dark leather furniture. He had invested with Raymond twice and profited once. Men like Victor did not believe in loyalty, but they believed in leverage. Raymond hoped that would be enough. Victor listened while Raymond paced. "She has frozen everything," Raymond said. "Temporarily, of course. The courts will reverse it once we challenge the trust." Victor swirled amber liquid in a glass. "Will they?" Raymond stopped. "That is why I came to you. I need bridge financing, legal costs, a few weeks." Victor's smile was small. "You need rescue." "I need liquidity." "You need rescue," Victor repeated. Raymond's face hardened. I made you money. Once, I brought you into rooms you could never enter. Victor chuckled, and now those rooms are pretending they never met you. Raymond leaned forward. Do not forget who I am. Victor set down the glass. That is your problem, Raymond. You remember who you were in public and forget what you signed in private. The sentence sounded too much like Amara. Raymond hated him for it. Victor opened a drawer and removed a thin file. I received a notice from Meridian Legal this afternoon. Any assistance that helps you move restricted assets could expose me. You are afraid of my wife. Victor looked amused. You should have been. Raymond left with nothing. The city outside seemed different now. Restaurants he once entered without booking had no tables. Clubs where he had been greeted by name asked whether he was still a member. Drivers wanted payment up front. Even his tailor sent a message requesting settlement of old invoices before releasing any garments. Debt did not arrive like one monster. It arrived like 1,000 small doors closing. By midnight, Raymond was in the back of a hired car he could not afford, calling Celeste. She answered on the 4th ring. Where are you? She asked. Handling matters. You took my card. I needed it. It was declined at the pharmacy. He exhaled sharply. Celeste, this is not the time for drama. There was silence. Then she said, I had to ask the nurse for help. Raymond rubbed his forehead. Good, that is what nurses are for. Something in Celeste went still. You're not coming back, are you? I will when I can. No, she said softly, you will come when you need somewhere to sleep. Raymond's eyes narrowed. Careful. The word carried a threat without details. Celeste looked at the white wall in front of her and suddenly saw the mansion hall again. Amara removing her ring. Amara not begging. Amara arranging safety for the woman who helped humiliate her. Careful. Celeste realized she had been careful for months. Careful not to call too late. Careful not to ask too many questions. Careful not to mention Amara by name unless Raymond did first. Careful to accept what was given and pretend it was love. She was tired. I'm meeting compliance tomorrow, she said. Raymond sat up. No, you are not. Yes, I am. Celeste, listen to me. They will twist your words. You already did. He went silent. She ended the call before he could recover. The next morning, Amara received news that Celeste had agreed to cooperate. She was alone in her river house kitchen, making coffee. For all her wealth, she still liked making coffee herself when decisions were heavy. There was something honest about boiling water. It did not flatter you. It did not lie. It became steam, or it did not. Madame Elise called at 7:02 a.m. She wants protection from retaliation, Elise said. Give it, Amara replied. She may provide evidence against Raymond. Then ensure her counsel is present. There was a pause. You are being generous. Amara looked out the window at the river, moving under pale light. No, she said, I am being precise. After the call, she stood there for a long moment. People would expect her to destroy Celeste completely. Some would call any restraint weakness. They wanted a spectacle, the betrayed wife crushing the mistress, the powerful woman proving her power through cruelty. But Amara had learned from her father that power was most dangerous when it became entertainment. Her father once took her to a factory after a manager was caught stealing wages. Amara had been 17, furious on behalf of the workers. Fire him in front of everyone, she said. Let them see. Her father shook his head. Let them see justice, not humiliation. What is the difference? Justice repairs the room. Humiliation only changes who is afraid. That lesson had stayed. Raymond had humiliated her. She would not become him to punish him. At 10 o'clock, Celeste entered Meridian Crown's compliance suite wearing plain maternity clothes provided by the medical residents. Without makeup and diamonds, she looked younger, frightened, and painfully human. Amara did not attend the interview. She watched only the opening through secure video for legal reasons, then turned it off. Madame Elise noticed, "You do not want to hear." "I want the truth recorded," Amara said. "I do not need to feed on it." But the truth came anyway, summarized in reports. Celeste provided messages. Raymond had coached her to describe certain approvals as independent. He had told her which executives were friendly. He had shown her how to access a private hospitality budget. He had promised that after the divorce, she would be moved into a public-facing foundation role. There were worse things. Raymond had used Celeste's name on documents she had not fully understood. He had connected her employee profile to Shell reimbursements. If the scheme collapsed, she would look like the greedy insider, while he claimed ignorance as a spouse. Celeste cried when the lawyers explained it. "He said it was for our future," she whispered. Amara read that line 3 hours later and closed the file. "For our future." Raymond had said the same thing to her when he borrowed against the first estate. He did not change his lies, he only changed the woman hearing them. By the third day, Raymond had moved into a budget motel under a false name that fooled no one. His suitcase sat open on a chair. His phone battery was low. His beard had begun to shadow his jaw. The mirror over the sink showed him a man he refused to recognize. He still had one weapon: public sympathy. At 6 p.m., a gossip channel released a blurry video of him outside the mansion gate with Celeste beside him. The captions spread fast: "Duchess Amara throws pregnant woman onto street after husband's affair." For 20 minutes, Raymond felt alive again. He called a freelance journalist and gave a trembling performance about cruelty, control, and a wife's jealousy. He did not mention debts. He did not mention fraud. He did not mention the medical residents. He spoke of an unborn child punished for adult mistakes. The internet did what it always did. It chose emotion before evidence. By 7 p.m., Amara's name was trending. By 7:30, commentators were asking whether female power had become too ruthless. By 8, old photos of Amara looking unsmiling at formal events were used as proof of coldness. Raymond watched from the motel bed and smiled. There she is, he thought. The woman who cared what people thought. He remembered the early marriage, how Amara would grow quiet after society columns called her severe or unfeminine. She never cried publicly, but at night she sometimes stood before the mirror removing jewelry piece by piece, as if each diamond had become heavy. Raymond used to comfort her. Then later, he used the same wound. "You must appear softer," he told her before interviews. "People already think you are intimidating." "You mean men think that?" she replied once. "I mean donors think that." He trained her to translate criticism into responsibility. If people disliked his arrogance, she had failed to soften him. If people feared her competence, she had failed to smile enough. If gossip wounded her, she had failed to rise above it. Now he expected the old wound to bleed. At 8:15, Meridian Crown Holdings released its statement. It was not emotional. It was not defensive. It was devastating. The statement confirmed an active investigation into financial misconduct involving Duke Raymond's private entities, clarified that safe medical accommodation had been offered to Celeste, confirmed that no action was taken regarding pregnancy or personal status, and announced the creation of a restitution review for individuals potentially misled by unauthorized claims of access to Meridian contracts. Attached was a timeline. Not all evidence, just enough. Dates, transfers, disclosures, court orders, property trust records, employment policy violations, nothing dramatic, everything documented. The public mood shifted within an hour. By midnight, journalists were no longer asking why Amara was cruel. They were asking how long Raymond had been lying. In his motel room, Raymond threw the phone against the wall. It bounced onto the carpet, screen cracked but alive, still glowing with headlines. His face twisted with rage. He had counted on Amara's silence because she had been silent for years. He did not understand that silence could be preparation. He had mistaken her restraint for fear, her dignity for weakness, her privacy for lack of evidence. Now the evidence had a voice, and it spoke better than he did. The next week became a slow public unmasking. Investors came forward. Former aides spoke anonymously. Staff members described unpaid invoices hidden behind luxury events. A chauffeur remembered midnight trips to meetings Raymond claimed were diplomatic. A junior accountant at Meridian revealed she had flagged suspicious reimbursements months earlier and been ignored by Celeste's department head, who was now suspended. Raymond's title remained, but it began to sound decorative, like a medal pinned to a sinking man. Amara did not appear on television. She did not give tearful interviews. She did not explain her heartbreak to strangers hungry for performance. That angered people at first, then it fascinated them. A woman who does not beg to be understood becomes dangerous in the public imagination. At the River House, Amara worked 18-hour days, not because she needed distraction, but because damage had to be repaired. She met with legal teams, auditors, staff representatives, and affected investors. She signed approvals for protective funds. She personally reviewed the list of lower-level employees who might face discipline, separating those who knowingly participated from those who had been pressured. Madame Elise found her one night in the study surrounded by files. "You should sleep," she said. Amara did not look up. "So should you. I am older, I need less beauty." Amara almost smiled. Elise placed a folder on the desk. "Raymond's legal team has requested mediation. Already. They are calling it a good faith effort. And what do you call it? Panic-wearing perfume." This time, Amara did smile. Elise sat opposite her. For a while, neither woman spoke. They had worked together long enough to understand the comfort of silence. Finally, Elise said, "May I say something not as an employee?" Amara closed the file. "Yes. You do not have to prove that you are unaffected." The room seemed to deepen. Amara looked toward the fireplace, unlit in the warm season. "I am not unaffected." "No," Elise said gently, "you are very good at bleeding inward." Amara's fingers tightened around the pen. When her mother died, Amara had returned from the funeral and attended a board call 3 hours later because a shipping strike threatened thousands of jobs. A man on the call praised her professionalism. She had accepted the praise, then vomited afterward from grief. People admired strength because they rarely saw its private cost. "Sometimes," Amara said quietly, "I wonder when I became this person." Elise leaned back. "Which person?" "The one who can end a marriage with documents." Elise's eyes softened. "No, you ended a fraud with documents. The marriage ended long before." Amara looked down at her bare ring finger. There were memories she had not allowed herself to enter, small ones. The first apartment they shared while the mansion was being restored, Raymond burning toast and blaming the toaster. The way he once carried her through floodwater when their car stalled. The first anniversary letter he wrote by hand before he began having assistants choose gifts. Had that been real? That question was crueler than betrayal. Betrayal did not only steal the present, it returned to the past and painted doubts over everything. Elise seemed to know where her mind had gone. "Even if some of it was real," she said, "it does not excuse what became real later." Amara nodded slowly. Outside, the river moved through the dark, carrying moonlight in broken pieces. Meanwhile, Raymond's life shrank. The motel became too expensive. A cousin allowed him to stay in a guest room for 2 nights, then asked him to leave after reporters appeared at the gate. A former friend offered a sofa, then withdrew the offer when Meridian's lawyers contacted him about past investments. Raymond sold his watch for far less than it was worth. For the first time in his adult life, he handled cash carefully. He hated the texture of small bills. Celeste remained in protected housing and continued cooperating. She gave birth weeks later to a healthy baby boy. The news reached Amara through legal channels, not gossip. For a long time, Amara sat with the message. A boy. Raymond's son. She felt something unexpected then, not jealousy, not pain exactly, a tired tenderness for a child born into consequences he did not choose. She approved an anonymous contribution to a child welfare trust connected to the case, structured so Raymond could never touch it and Celeste could only access it under supervised terms for the baby's needs. When Madame Elise saw the approval, she said nothing. But she placed a cup of tea beside Amara and squeezed her shoulder once before leaving. The final confrontation came 6 weeks after the gate. It happened in a courtroom, not a mansion. Raymond arrived wearing a suit that no longer fit perfectly. Stress had sharpened his face, and sleeplessness had darkened the skin beneath his eyes. He still tried to walk like a duke, but the room did not rise to meet him. Amara sat at the opposite table with her attorneys. She wore navy blue, no diamonds, no wedding ring. Celeste sat behind the prosecution's civil counsel with her lawyer, holding herself carefully, as if every movement reminded her of how much her life had changed. She did not look at Raymond. He looked at her often. Not with love, with accusation. The judge reviewed motions, restrictions, financial disclosures. Raymond's legal team argued that Amara had acted vindictively. They spoke of emotional distress, reputational destruction, excessive control of marital assets. Then Amara's attorneys presented the documents. One after another. Loans, signatures, transfers, messages, witness statements, trust structures, evidence that Raymond had represented himself as having authority he did not possess, evidence that funds had been routed through personal channels, evidence that Celeste had been positioned as a convenient shield. The courtroom grew quieter with each page. Raymond stared forward, jaw tight. But the moment that destroyed him was not a bank record. It was a recording. A meeting from 8 months earlier, captured through authorized corporate security in a Meridian conference room after hours. Raymond's voice filled the courtroom, relaxed and amused. Amara is sentimental. She will not go nuclear. She built that company like a child. She cannot bear scandal touching it. Once Celeste is visibly pregnant, the optics will trap her. She will negotiate. She always chooses dignity over war. The recording paused. No one moved. Amara felt every eye in the room turn toward her, but she did not lower her head. Raymond's own voice had done what no accusation could. It revealed intent, strategy, cruelty without heat. He had not stumbled into betrayal. He had planned humiliation as leverage. The judge's expression hardened. Raymond's attorney whispered urgently to him, but Raymond was no longer listening. He was looking at Amara. For the first time, perhaps, he saw not the wife he had deceived, not the fortune he had enjoyed, not the name he had used, but the person he had tried to corner. And he saw that she had left the corner long ago. During recess, Raymond approached her in the hallway. Her security moved, but she raised one hand slightly. They stopped at a distance. Raymond stood before her, thinner, diminished, but still carrying a shard of the old arrogance like a broken blade. "You recorded me," he said. Amara looked at him. Meridian recorded an unauthorized meeting in a restricted room. "You set a trap." "No, you entered one you built." He laughed bitterly. "Listen to you, so righteous." She said nothing. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Was any of it real to you?" The question surprised her. For a second, the hallway, the lawyers, the cameras at the far end all seemed to fade. She saw the young man from years ago, rain in his hair, smiling at her like she was the only person who mattered. She saw herself wanting so badly to believe that being chosen was the same as being cherished. "Yes," she said. Raymond's face flickered. That answer hurt him more than no. Because if it had been real to her, then he had not been fighting a cold woman. He had been destroying someone who loved him. He looked away first. "I did love you," he muttered. Amara studied him. "No," she said gently, "you loved being forgiven by me." His mouth tightened. "You think you know everything." "I know enough." He looked toward the courtroom doors. "What happens to me now?" The question was naked, not noble, not charming, just afraid. Amara could have given him cruelty. She could have described every consequence waiting, the judgments, the loss of assets, the investigations that might become criminal, the social exile, the debts that would follow him like dogs. Instead, she said, "You will meet the truth without servants." He looked at her sharply. She walked past him. This time, he did not call her back. Months passed. The mansion was reopened under the House of Vale Foundation as a leadership institute for women from working-class families entering finance, law, engineering, and public service. The East Wing, which Raymond had ordered Amara to prepare for his mistress, became a scholarship residence. Reporters loved that detail. Amara did not give it to them. Someone else leaked it, maybe Elise, though she denied it with suspicious elegance. At the opening ceremony, Amara stood beneath the same golden doors where her humiliation had been staged. Sunlight poured across the hall. The servants were now staff members with better wages and formal contracts. Marcus headed security operations for the foundation, and his wife, fully recovered, managed community partnerships. Young women filled the hall, laughing softly, holding folders, looking around with the stunned caution of people entering a place they had been told was not built for them. Amara watched them and felt something unclench. A girl named Nia approached her after the speeches. She could not have been more than 19, with nervous hands and determined eyes. "Duchess Amara," she said, "is it true you started with factories?" Amara smiled. "I started with debts." Nia blinked. "Really? Really? But you weren't afraid?" Amara almost laughed. Afraid, she had been afraid in boardrooms, in hospital rooms, in marriage, in silence, in scandal. Courage had never been the absence of fear. It was the decision that fear would not be allowed to sign documents on your behalf. "I was afraid often," Amara said. "I learned to read anyway." Nia nodded, as if storing the sentence somewhere sacred. Across the hall, Madame Elise watched with satisfaction. Later that evening, after the guests left and the mansion settled into a new kind of quiet, Amara walked alone through the East Wing. The rooms had been transformed. Gone were the velvet drapes Raymond had loved, the ornamental excess, the museum-like coldness. In their place were desks, warm lamps, shelves of books, fresh linens, and windows open to the garden. At the last room, she paused. This had been the suite Raymond ordered her to prepare for Celeste. For one heartbeat, she saw it as it had been that day. Celeste standing uncertainly under the chandelier, Raymond glowing with cruelty, servants frozen, Amara's ring sliding from her finger. Then the vision faded. Now there was a study table by the window, a stack of welcome letters, a vase of yellow flowers. Amara stepped inside and touched one petal. The past did not disappear, it changed rooms. Her phone buzzed. A message from Mr. D'Acosta. Final settlement approved. She read the summary. Raymond's claims dismissed, financial judgments entered, asset restrictions extended, restitution process authorized, further investigation ongoing. There was also a note. Duke Raymond has declined temporary housing assistance offered through neutral counsel. Amara looked at that line for a long time. Pride was a strange prison. Even when the door opened, Some people refused to leave because they did not like who held the key. Raymond was not literally on the streets every night. Sometimes he found cheap rooms. Sometimes distant acquaintances let him stay until his bitterness filled the space. Sometimes he slept in his car before it too was repossessed. Homelessness for him was not only the absence of walls, it was the absence of entitlement. No room recognized him as master. No table waited for him. No woman stood ready to turn his collapse into dignity. As for Celeste, she entered a legal cooperation agreement. Her career at Meridian was over, but she avoided the worst charges by providing evidence and accepting responsibility. She moved to a modest apartment arranged through family support, far from the circles that once dazzled her. Motherhood sobered her faster than scandal. The baby needed feeding, warmth, patience. He did not care about titles. One afternoon, nearly a year later, Amara received a handwritten letter. The envelope had no crest. The handwriting was careful. It was from Celeste. Amara considered throwing it away unopened. Then she sat at her desk and read. Celeste did not ask forgiveness. That was the first thing Amara respected. She did not blame Raymond entirely. That was the second. She wrote that she had confused being chosen with being valued. She wrote that she was ashamed of entering another woman's home, as if pain could be inherited like property. She wrote that her son was healthy. She wrote that she would spend her life teaching him not to become a man who measured love by control. At the bottom, one line made Amara stop. "You gave me shelter when he gave me excuses." Amara folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. She did not reply. Not every apology required a bridge. Some only deserved a witness. Winter came. The city moved on as cities do. New scandals bloomed. New names trended. New villains were chosen for public hunger. But the story of Duchess Amara remained, changing shape as people retold it. Some called her ruthless. Some called her brilliant. Some called her cold. Women who had survived quieter betrayals called her something else. Brave. At the River House, Amara hosted a small dinner on the anniversary of the day she left the mansion. Not a celebration, exactly, more like a reclamation. Madame Elise came. Marcus and his wife came. Mr. Han came with his husband. Lord Adrian came late, carrying a bottle of wine older than Raymond's excuses. They ate at a long wooden table. No cameras, no speeches, no golden doors. At some point, Adrian raised his glass. "To Amara," he said, "who finally taught a foolish man the difference between silence and surrender." Amara gave him a look. "You enjoy sounding wise too much." "I am old. It is one of the few pleasures left." They laughed. Later, after everyone had gone, Amara stood on the back terrace, wrapped in a dark shawl. The river reflected the moon in trembling silver. The air smelled of cold leaves and distant rain. She heard her mother's voice in memory. "Make sure he loves you when you say no." Amara looked at her bare finger. The pale ring mark was gone now. For a long time, she had thought the ending of her marriage would be the end of her story. Raymond had trained her to believe that his presence completed the portrait. Society had helped him, rewarding wives who endured quietly and punishing women who chose themselves too loudly. But standing there, Amara understood something that would have frightened the younger version of her. Loss had not emptied her. It had returned her. The next morning, she went to the foundation early. In the main hall, sunlight poured through the tall windows, bright enough to make the polished floor glow. Students were already gathered near the staircase, discussing case studies, internships, impossible dreams. Their voices rose into the high ceiling like birds. Amara paused at the entrance. This house had once been a stage for her humiliation. Now it was full of women learning contracts. That was the revenge no headline could fully understand. Not poverty for Raymond. Not disgrace for Celeste. Not even the documents that stripped away the false kingdom. The true revenge was transformation. Raymond had brought betrayal into her home and expected it to become her prison. Amara turned the prison into a doorway. And somewhere in the city, a disgraced duke still told anyone who would listen that his wife had destroyed him. He never understood, even then, that destruction had not begun when Amara signed the file. It began years earlier, every time he lied and called it love. It began every time he borrowed against trust and called it leadership. It began every time he mistook patience for blindness. It began the moment he looked at a woman who had survived men sharper than him and decided she was too dignified to fight back. Duchess Amara Vale did not need to shout her victory. She lived it. She signed scholarships in the room where he once plotted her surrender. She rebuilt trust where he had spread fraud. She protected the child he had tried to use as a shield. She let the mistress become a witness instead of a corpse beneath scandal. She let the courts do what rage could not. And when people asked her, years later, how she knew the exact moment to walk away, she never mentioned the mistress, the pregnancy, the frozen accounts, or the mansion gate. She simply said, "The moment I realized he expected my pain to obey him." Then she would smile. Not loudly, not weakly, just calmly. And everyone in the room would understand that some smiles are not signs of forgiveness. Some smiles are the sound of a queen closing the door.